last question was the opposite way. The question beginning the mind is that how can we be it? Atzmos is fundamentally a contradiction of reality. And the second question now was on the opposite. That since we're saying now that what's ma'ored is the Sheresh HaNeshama, so the Sheresh HaNeshama is ma'ored what? Gilui HaMalchus, but the Sheresh HaNeshama is no shaykhs to Malchus. Malchus is Gilui, Malchus is Oinamus. And the Sheresh HaNeshama, we said, is Mushish and Atzmus, as opposed to the Metzias HaNeshama. The Metzias HaNeshama is already an identity, shaykhs Tatzilus and lower. But Sheresh HaNeshama, Mushish and Atzmus, so what's got to do with the source of the neshama, that's integral to and inseparable from being ma'ored the ratzon and lucha. It's also higher than the whole Geder HaMelech, fundamentally. So the question is now the reverse. And that's he's going to explain now. We started yesterday. Zayin to answer that question. And what we're getting at this Maamar is a most extraordinary description, for want of a better word, of etzem HaNeshama that is bound up with Atzmos. In simple language, the Rebbe lays bare, mamish, what is it, who and what is a Yid? And then the kud is that that's from etzem HaMachshava. There's Machshava and etzem HaMachshava. So there's three dargis, as it were, Atzmos, etzem HaMachshava, and Machshava. So let's see. Bir inyan, the binyan HaMalchus, shenasa dem shachos atzm shadei gil etzem HaNeshama. To explain now again that why is Malchus rebuilt as a result of drawing on, which is rooted in Atzmos, as we said, the two biyurim, the gilui of Daflove and Sof, and then Atzmos Mamish. So that happens to the gilui of etzem HaNeshama, but we still no shaykhs to Malchus, no shaykhs to why in the Neshama is not either this inyan, yes, right? Question's clear. That being in Yisrael, all of the Machshava says in Medrash, describing the Medrash, the various things that precede creation. Medrash concludes that Yisrael all the Machshava, Yisrael Kodma L'chol Davar. Medrash says that. And what Machshava, Hashem's thought, ascended in Hashem's thought. So the diak is Olu b'Machshava, rose up literally in the Eibishter's Machshava, meaning in Machshava Gufa, in Machshava itself, the level of Aliyah. And what is that? Machshava Zu, Machshava Atzmos. Meaning an essential Machshava. What is meant by an essential Machshava? He said yesterday, and we'll see now in the text. Machshava B'chlal, U'mechutz La'chayshech. Thinking is you're entertaining something outside of self. And even a person is thinking about something that's happening to his body, it's still outside of the thinker. The person thinks about something, the machshava about dava, the matam, al the matzma, the thought about that thing is a descent from the essential self. It's like outside of him. Why did I say like outside of him? Because he's thinking about it in his head. And it's very intimate in the closest place possible. It's the closest place of the person, where the person's expressed in the deepest ways in his thoughts. But since so that's within him, obviously, but since he's thinking about something which is what? Eizedova, so it's like chutz mimeh. That's general machshava. However, machshava d'Yisrael, what's the machshava of Eden? Hicha, the machish of atzma, is one with a thinker, a different level of machshava. What's the beer? The beer, he says later, he hints to it at the end of this also. I'll tell you now, because otherwise there's no havana. What does this mean? So the beer he gives later is a child. That is, on the one hand, a separate entity. On the other hand, what's the shortish of the child? It's in the previous Moishe of the father. On the one hand, we had to rephrase that. On the one hand, a separate entity, on the other hand, an extension. That's a machshava atzmos. And quite simply, when you're thinking about your child's welfare and being, is it somebody else? Yes or no? And you want the child to be independent from you. You want the child to be independent from you and self-sufficient. That's mamish nivdo. That's a separate person. On the other hand, and dafka because of that, that's the paradox. Your desire of your child's independence and the child to stand on his or own feet is much deeper than your desire for any other person. Why? Because it's an extension of you. Because it's a part of you. It's paradox. That's the motion here. So now we'll get to that at the end of this ice. Let's continue. Zehu, and the Medrash says, with who Hashem consulted before creation. There's various days, the malachim. The end is kind of the previous days are usurped, in the sense that we go deeper. And the final, with whom did he consult? The Nishmusein shel tzadikim, the neshamas of Eden. Of tzadikim, and in brackets he adds, Yamich kolam tzadikim. All Yidden are tzadikim. It's a lot pashut, there's little brackets, because one of the protests of the Rishoyim was, the Malachim was, that the Rishoyim would be produced when he would create man and produce this. So to say that he was Nimlech, Shem Shel Tzadikim, is kind of say, yeah, never mind Rishoyim, but he consulted with the Tzadikim. That's what I learned. That's not how this explains the Medrash. It goes, Ma'amech Kol Tzadikim, every year. It's not an answer to the Malachim's taina. Okay, not Rishoyim, Tzadikim. It's a higher darga, Neshamas Yisrael. That's what it's meant by the essential Tzadikim. So that's not poshut in the Medrash. That's the beer. As he adds in the brackets, Amlech Kol Tzadikim. But Chassidus explains. It means every year. So what does this mean? What's he want to explain now? Now that he has said this essential statement that Neshamas Yisrael are rooted machshava atzmis, that is going to answer how the whole hamlocha, the honor emloch, is totally and is realized and affected by Eden. As it goes on to explain, v'zehu, and therefore, having said what we just did, this machshava atzmis is opposed to machshava stam. So this is the inyan that Eibishter consulted with Eden. We said before, that malacha is not only about to create or not. He consulted with, as it were, with the Neshamas Yisrael about the whole very creation of Oilus. What does that mean? Should there be a thought to create? Not the actual creation.
Is there a consultation if there's no thought about which to consult, right?
No, there is. It's machshava atzmis. This is the machshava atzmis. This is the machshava atzmis. But this is machshava, but the shah is something else. What does this mean? What are these two things? Not only al briyas ha'olamus, but gam ala machshava lisavus. So that machshava is the chutz machshava, the second part. The machshava atzmi is entertaining whether there should be a articulated machshava, a machshava that actually entertains the isavus of olamus about something else other. And machshava atzmi of Eden precede that, and therefore that's the source. More detail in a moment. So there's not only is the hamlocha, the consultation as it were, whether there should be actual creation, but the whole notion of creation, in other words. Whether there'll be this actual thought, this is mamash chutz mimenu thought, thinking about something else or not. Technically, the machshava atzmis determines whether there'll be a machshava stam. What's the machshava stam? Hisavas oilmus or not. And then it's the actual bria, which is the dibur, which is malchus. Then move on further detail now. Elaboration. So it's understood in conclusion that this consultation, which is a machshava, whether for there should be creation, they're higher than the actual bria sa'ilumus. So what kind of machshava is it? It's machshava atzmis. That's explained right at the outset this morning. What machshava atzmis means, and that is where Yidden are rooted. Further elaboration, machshava the bria sa'ilumus. Machshava of actual creation, the highest level, the Milo, he dugmas, that's parallels, that's an actual thought of entertaining, of something, as we explained. What is it in our case? What's the Ezed Dover? Machshava livra elemus. Whether he's going to create worlds. Machshava, he chutzmenu, so he's thinking about, although he's thinking within himself, he's thinking about something which is outside of himself. Is he going to create something outside of him? That's the machshava of what? Of bria. And here the whole answer to our question is that he saw all of machshava atzmis. Yidden, they ascended first in the machshava atzmis, and therefore it's from there they are the source of creation. And that's the meaning of Bamin Nimlach. And the consultation is not only the actual creation, but the very thought of creation. That's machshava stam, and they are rooted. So there's three levels. Machshava 4. There's atzmos, then there's machshava atzmis, machshava stam, and then there's the dibur, the actual creation. And Yidden are rooted in machshava atzmis, which is the mokla of machshava stam. What's machshava stam? Machshava stam, what does that mean? Lamaila. That is the whole notion of creation, not the actual decision to create. It first has to create the notion of otherness, and then are we going to create otherness? Then machshava to create otherness. Then the actual creation. So the key word is notion. The notion of otherness. That's the machshava for creation. Machshava atzmis is not even the notion of otherness. As the Moishe we brought over, which you'll mention at the end of those. So we still have to explain, though, starting an explanation. The shaila is Yidden, Mushish, and Atzmos. What's the shaykhs to Malchus? We decided to develop the answer. He consulted with Neshama Yisrael on the whole creation. What level is this consultation? It's this bridge between Atzmos, Mamash, and creation. It's not Atzmos, it's Machshava Atzmos. Yeah, like the child and the father. It's not the father, it is extension of the father. And as we said, the father wants a child to be independent and separate, not dependent on him. Adara, because he's his child. Continuing. Start again. Which precedes the dibur, the actual articulated thought of creation. Again, say again. This is the analogy to thinking about something else. What's the something else? So this is the machshava, which is chutz mimenu, and he saw all of machshava atzmis, and therefore consulted in them, and therefore they're the shirish and makar of creation. What's creation? The desire and the emler. Vurisham has explained there. Where's the there? What this starts from? This abir. The common makoimus. Okay, the common makoimus. Time as there sham loch yam machshava the bris oile v'soyse misal shalom machshava atzmis. So explains there my modern there. But the reason that the consultation of, and the decision, in other words, for the, in the Eibishter's Machshava to create, was with the Yidden that arose at Machshava Atzmis. And again, we still have to explain, because Afshe Machshava Atzmis, Machshava de Bris Oilimus, Machshava Atzmis is still not related to anything outside of self. So how can thinking about that Machshava Atzmi be a shirish and market for actual creation? Again, kind of the same question, but elaborating, spelling it out and now answering who keep Machshava Atzmi Shnei Yifan. Now comes the essence of the explanation. In Machshava Atzmi itself, there's two ways. Shechoshev this Atzmi is thinking about himself. Now that would not be, that is completely disconnected from otherness, from the notion of otherness. That's not where the Neshama Sabru. Here's the paradox, the bridge. Thinking about something other than but it's still not separate from him. He is the thinker, the producer of the idea, as opposed to thinking about something else. Listen, elaborate a little bit. Again, it's going to say in a moment the child. Every other machshava, the child is learning Tanya and Perek Beis, comes to the machshava of the father, the deepest level. Pnimius HaMoichin. What's the difference between Neshama and everything else? Everything else is a creation. He's entertaining a lechatchila to create something other. Here the diak is who atzmai who achayish. So to put it in simple language you're all familiar with and which you all know, creation is yesh ma'ayin. Yesh ma'ayin is completely, fundamentally, only b'cheka atzmus that can create something from nothing. It is not godliness. Creation is not godliness. It's a nivra. But the neshama is not yesh ma'ayin. The neshama is on that. It's not the Eibishter. On the other hand, it's who atzmi yocheshev. He's not thinking about something else, even though it is neshama Yisrael, but he's producing it. He's producing also creation, but that's yesh ma'ayin. Let's give a second. Use a paragraph. What's in between? He's also producing creations. Einid Mulvada. It's a difference. If Einid Mulvada, what distinction can you draw between the shamas and anything else? Einid Mulvada. So the answer, as best as we can explain this in Oisius, is that the Einid Mulvada of everything else is because it's not a Metzias. It's yesh ma'ayin. The Einid Mulvada expressed in the neshama is, it is a likus. It's everything. Neshama is everything, and Welt is nothing. Because Eina Machshava Chutz Mimenu Ki Hu Atzmi Achish. She's producing otherness from within self Kavayochel, not otherness Yesh Ma'ayin like the rest of creation. It's a different kind of otherness. And the analogy is a ben, is the child. It is other, but it's extension of the father. Which is why he's Yodesh, etc. No, what are you saying? Answer it. This requires a very deep thought and try and get the just a little bit. Hope we have some understanding. Let's continue. Zershi Yisrael, all of the machshava, but oifen have base of machshava atzmis. The second kind of machshava atzmis, the first kind of machshava atzmis is mamish self atzmis. Eibush says that we're thinking about himself. Here we're talking about the Eibishter thinking about Eden, which is not something else. No, it is something else because he's thinking about an other of otherness in the sense that he's going to, this is the decision, it's the ultimate B'chiras Atzmos, is to give rise to Neshamas Yisrael, which are at once separate and at once part of it. And the Emes says we do not fundamentally have the Oisius for this. We cannot wrap our heads around this completely. We can't wrap our heads around creation either. It's Yesh and it's Ayin. Indian Lavadi, but there's also creation. 100 as baiting, we're approximating it. Of course, we can't with Seichel fully understand it, but it is beyond miraculous that we have the understanding that we do, and that's because Chassidus is Amshocha Pnimius Atik, and it's Megalides in Yonim to us, the Mat. So we can say the Oisius in some way, There's a word from the Rebbe Rashab that Neshama is a likus, where likus became a nivri. It's a very hard oasis. A likus becoming a nivri. So we're not talking, that's a method of Neshama becoming a Metzias. It still retains, it is a likus. It's in the world of Atzilus and Bri in a guf. It's still a likus. It's becoming a nivri is a difficult oasis. But it is this difficult, because that's the paradox of Neshama. Otherness, but not otherness. It's not true of creation. Creation is otherness and it's bottled b'metzias. It's nothing. Neshama is everything and creation is nothing. Creation becomes everything when it knows it's nothing. When we do a mitzvah and we use vel to express a likus, then it becomes a useful nothing. Otherwise, it's a very we're looking for opposite of useful. Useless at best. Let's continue. So the Neshamas are oif and abeis. Are we clear now? Now, what darkness do we have? 4. Atzmos, machshava atzmis. In machshava atzmis now too, I found him thinking about self, but thinking about something else, but it's still atzmisdik. Then there's machshava stam, which precedes actual creation. Then dibur, the actual malchus, the creation. Are we clear? Does that make sense? We're clear? Yeah. Now this is kind of the parallel. The square brackets, which I said at the beginning of the shir, because we had otherwise like what is going on. So that's bottom atem lavai location. That's why you call children, because the analogy, the mata is a child. The kibun t'sheish on the shamas machshava atzmis. Since the shamas come, on the one hand, it's within the Eibishter himself, not thinking about something else. The child is not somebody else, it's an extension of the father. On the other hand, Atmos is thinking about something else. He stresses like in italics both, because there is the otherness, that's the ben, but it's conjured by Atmos. He's not thinking about creating something else. Creating something else. Even after the neshamas are drawn and manifested, they never lose being God's children, an extension of Him. A child embodies this paradox. One end is a separate entity. In the child is the Atzmi Sa'av. This whole Perek Beis in Tanya explains what a Nasi is. The Nasi Hadoir, or the what's it, of the Perek, the Rosh B'nei Yisrael, in there the Neshama is not lost in a conscious way, is the Atzmi Yisrael. That's the brain of the child. That is the same stuff, mamash, as the brain of the father that produced the child. And we are the rest of the Ivorim, they're all connected to the brain. It's in the Neshama and the consciousness, therefore, of the Nasi that the Chelik, the Kam Yamal Mamish is not lost. It's transparent there. We are the more than Nivdil Maya'av component of the Ben by divine design, the different Ivorim. But in the Rosh, in the Mayach of the child, that's Me'atzmei HaSa'av Mamish. So now, I'm going to stop here. This ought to answer. So how is Neshamas Yisrael? Why by a Yid through blowing shofar? What's he doing? He's being ba'oder his shirish and moket, which is the machshava atzmius, the second dalig of machshava atzmius in the atzmius kavayachol. That is pearl the whole inyan of ano emloich. We'll just finish the paragraph. And therefore the whole consultation for creation was with Yidden, What's the kavanah of Briyas Olam? On the one hand, to create a separate entity. And this entity should be a dira lo yisbarach atzmo, should be revealed there. So what's the model for that? Separate, but one with him. And that's the kavanah. Okay, we said it's very big kids in that. Tomorrow, Be'er Hashem will elaborate. Assuming we're going to have the shir tomorrow, same time. I'll confirm with on the WhatsApp. We kind of clear this critical last point. The Rabbi doesn't spell it out for us, but that's the pshat. That what's dira b'tachtonim is to create a nivra, a tachten, and that tachten should be a dira. So who embodies this impossible opposite, this impossible fusion in the very identity, Neshamas Yisrael, separate but one. So when the Yid is ma'ored, his Sheresh HaNeshama, so that sets in motion the whole Kavanah Sabriya, which is be'emes him, expressed in the mandate of La'asas Yisbarach Dira B'Tachtonim. Okay, much more detail, and we have to learn tomorrow. We have to learn tomorrow the mitzvah tkiyah for the mitzvah component, to answer how the mitzvah, which comes only after there was the shaila. The mitzvah comes after this, the melech, after the relationship. How could the mitzvah be ma'ir the Indian? It's all part of this whole beautiful beard. Okay, so Be'ez Hashem will learn tomorrow. But just look out.